So all in all, this video could save you a lot of money. There's no getting away from it. As amazing as this hobby is, woodworking can be expensive. And one of the biggest outlays you're going to make is tools. And like any other woodworker, I've bought good ones and I've bought bad ones. So I'm going to take some of the common areas of woodworking and I'm going to show you what I wish I'd bought from the very start. Because let's be totally honest, there are some gems that will serve you for your entire woodworking life. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. And there are some that you will have replaced long ago with better options. It's not always buying the most expensive that will do the best job, as you're going to see in this video where we go back and look at the tools I wish I'd bought from the start. But don't mistake this for a sales video. There's also a couple of tools that almost everybody has in their workshop that I'm going to show you how to make out of scrap wood. So all in all, this video could save you a lot of money. So let's get started with tool number one. Let's talk clamps. Now don't worry, unlike every other video that I've done, I'm not just going to say to you these clamps are fantastic. You see, up until a couple of months ago, these were really the only way I was holding my work down to the workbench to work on it. For that, all you need is a lip around the outside of your workbench. You take whatever it is you want to work on and you clamp it down to your workbench and then you can work on it. And that's great. But there are other ways that I want to show you. So the first thing you can do is drill a load of dog holes in your workbench. That's going to cost you nothing more than a force and a bit. Once you've done that, you can buy whatever hold downs you want that work with the dog holes. If, unlike me, you drill all the way through, that opens up even more clamps that will go actually through your table and clamp the work down to it. So I didn't do that, so I'm limited to dog hole clamps that just sit inside the hole itself. You can go high end with bench dogs, or you could just buy a cheap aluminium one. They both do a job. Or, if you want to do something a bit experimental, pop-up bench dogs. They're not supposed to pop that high. That's more like it. But on their own, a bench dog is next to useless. That's where you need one of these two things. Pop that in a hole opposite the bench dog, put your work in between it, wind it out, and it clamps it down nice and tight. None of these are expensive. But what if you want to go one step further? What if you want to go for the ultimate way of holding down your work? My opinion. Well, that's where you have two choices. Either take your fancy new workbench and groove out a load of dovetail track on it, or do what I've done and build this, a sacrificial, dovetail grooved workpiece that you can then clamp your work stuff to. And bear with me because this is good. So first of all, to fix this onto your workbench, you can do what we did before with the clamps, or you can use the fancy bench dogs that I've just shown you. And one of these up against your pop-up bench dogs will hold this absolutely rock solid. So let's say you want to clamp a piece of wood to it to do a little bit of chiseling or planing. Well, that's where the dovetail slots work absolutely perfectly. But you need a clamp that works with them. Well, this is the clamp recommendation I'm going to be making today. And these are micro jig dovetail slot clamps. Work with the match fit system. Once you go down this rabbit hole, I feel you're going to be going for a long time. And one of these will probably lead to quite a few more and all the other accessories they've got. So be ready for that. It works really simply. You slide the clamp into the dovetail slot, clamp your workpiece down, and if you're smart about it and make a grid of these dovetail slots, your versatility goes through the roof. But why stop there? Because these even work on the side of your workbench. Pop a dovetail slot along the side of your workbench, and then if you want to work on the top of a longer board, simply clamp it to the side of your workbench, and now that is not going anywhere. You can buy cheaper clamps than this, but they involve one of two things. Either T-track, which needs to be embedded into your workbench, and that comes at a pretty hefty price, or they need a T-slot cut in because they're not dovetailed at the end, they are square on the profile. And that worries me because dovetail with its angled sides is a really sturdy way of clamping and evening out the pressure of the clamp on the wood itself. Because the one thing you don't want to do is have the wood fail on you because you're clamping too hard. What worries me about the T-slot is that because of its shape, if you put too much pressure, you're just going to pop off the top section of wood and then you're going to ruin your workbench for one, but you're also not going to get the clamping pressure you need. So not only are these, in my opinion, the most stable way of doing the job, but they're also the cheapest because you don't have to buy any of the fancy track to get them to actually work. These, well, those will always serve you well. So don't hesitate buying those. But the next step after that, whether you go down a T-track or a dovetail grooved route, that will dictate what hold downs you're going to use for the future of, or the lifetime of, the bench that you're working on. Now, if you've seen any of these types of videos before on my channel, you'll know all the links to the tools that I mentioned are down in the description. And also, if you're getting value out of it, click the like button, subscribe, and you'll find loads more videos like this. Now, let's get on to the next tool. Okay, next up, we're going to go through something that I see as being not just important, but vital for all woodworkers. And this relates to a router table, a planer, and a table saw. So it's something that's going to help 90% of woodworkers because it relates to the tools you will be using. And that's these. These were the cheapest push blocks I could find when I first started. And I didn't have a table saw at the time, so they were aimed for using with this homemade router table. And the idea is you push your wood through using the two paddles. That way your hand is going nowhere near the spinning bit in the router. These are made of really brittle plastic, so when they hit a router blade or a table saw blade, there's more chance of them actually sending shards at you than, say, if they're made of wood. But that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue I've found with them is actually they don't grip the wood after you've had them for maybe a few months. There is an expensive option for a seriously good bit of kit that you could get. This comes in at around about £40. And for another £20 more, you could buy its table saw brother or sister. Anyway, just comparing the paddles to start with, the engineering that's gone into them is night and day difference. This has a rubber base as opposed to a foam base, and with the bobbles on it is the grippiest thing. It's even gripping to the laminate of my table, which is probably the smoothest thing in this workshop, apart from my head. Very grippy. Not only that, but they also have these tabs at the back. So if you want to push your work along from behind, you can actually hook these to the back of the workpiece and push it through for some extra strength and extra control. But £40. Is that the way I wish I'd gone from the start? Here's the truth of it in a nutshell. These are awful. This is perfect, but expensive. So why not make your own? Without going into too many details here, I've basically tried to take the best features of this and put them in this. I've got a grippy base. This one's rubber. This I've gone for rubberized cork, which has a really good amount of grip, way more than this cheaper one. And the other thing I loved about these was the tabs at the back. I've put a movable tab so you can move it down to push your work through, and then you can tighten it off and move it out the way afterwards. There's no metal fixtures in the handle because I've countersunk it, and pretty much all the other dimensions are the same. So if you don't have the budget to get this, why not just try making your own? Only one confession comes with this, and that is, as good as the rubberized cork is, it's not quite as good as the knobbly rubber on this. I did try silicone, which was good, but didn't stick. So there's still improvements to be made. This next one is a super simple, super quick one. This, if you haven't seen one before, this is the Speed Square. This is possibly the most useful tool that you'll have in your woodworking career from start to finish. It's versatile, it's sturdy, it's accurate, and it does a huge amount of jobs. I'm only going to focus on two of those jobs now. One of which is this, the right angle. The first thing you should do when you get any new square is check that it's square. Piece of wood that you know has got one straight edge on it, strike a line, make sure it's heavy enough to see, turn it over, strike another line, not necessarily on top of it, but parallel. So long as there is a uniform spacing between them, then your square is, well, square. Now, job 2 is probably the thing I use it actually the most for, and that is using it as a guide for my circular saw. And where this really comes into its own is cutting something like a 4x2, 2x4, where you basically hold this up against the side of the piece of wood and then run the circular saw alongside it, ensuring you get a square 90-degree cut. Now, this is a 7-inch Speed Square and it will serve you well for a huge amount of time, but Something that I've added to it, and I wish I'd had from the start because there's been times I've struggled with this, is this. This is a 12-inch speed square, and it does everything that the 7-inch speed square does. The only difference is, if you're using your circular saw and cutting something wider, maybe a 2x7, this will sort you out. I'm not saying buy this instead of this, because to be honest, this is cumbersome for doing things like 2x4s. If you buy both of them, they're still very inexpensive. And in fact, I got this one free when I bought this big one. And I'll pop a link down to the description for the two that I got. And as with every square, do the parallel line test, because for the sake of a couple of seconds work at the start, you guarantee that square is never going to let you down over the long period of its life. Now this is a silly one, but only one that I've experienced fairly recently. We all dream of having workshops kitted out with all of the big machines. And each one of those comes with its own safety on and off switch. And I'm not saying you don't use those from the get-go. But what I am saying is, for instance, you turn your table saw on, you don't want to reach down to turn your dust extraction on. And I know there's expensive solutions where your dust extractor will turn on automatically with your table saw, but I don't want to be talking hundreds of pounds. I want to talk a cheap and easy fix. So what I've got is this. This is just a remote control. It's got 5 numbers and each one's got an on and off button. It comes with 5 plugs that go between the power cable and the socket. And so you leave the socket on the whole time, but then you control the machine with this. So you imagine if you're going to turn your table saw on, firstly, click a button on your remote, turn the dust extraction on, and then you can use your table saw. You haven't got to move. I can't really demonstrate by showing you loads of machines, switching them on and off, but what I do have is every light in my workshop attached to a different one of these. So let's see if they are any good. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. So let's take a short time now just to rattle through a few of the minor upgrades that I've made. And I'm talking things that you might only have spent a couple of pounds on, but they make such a vast difference. Things like upgrading from a corded glue gun to a cordless glue gun. This gets pulled out and used all the time, and now I don't have to faff around with a cord. Something that not only upgrades a technique, but also does it in a cheap way. Wax the bottom of your planes before use. The way of doing it cheaply and easily, tea light candles. Now adding an impact driver into your workflow is a brilliant addition. If you've got the budget for it, highly recommend it. But that's not what I'm recommending. You can get these bits that fit into an impact driver that give you a decent amount of length. But if, like me, you bought an impact driver set, upgrade 1 is easy because it normally comes with one of those sets. It's a simple extension that you pop in, and then you pop each bit that you use in there. It's magnetic so the bit doesn't fall out. This is good. However, for about £5, there's a better way. This is a magnetic extension bit, and it will not only hold the bit you decide to use in it, but also, because the little halo around the bit is magnetic, you can also just shove a screw on it. You can work one-handed to start off your drilling. This is an okay way of having your blue roll. And as long as you can find the end, it's not that much of a faff. But for a couple of pound more, I've got a tape dispenser and you can just rip it off as you need it. Now this section is not necessarily about replacing sanding or hand planing with anything else. It's more adding to it. Next tool that I'm going to recommend that I wish I'd had from the start is a must-have for a multitude of reasons. And I almost guarantee that it is one that most people think is out of their reach for one of 2 reasons, which we'll get to in a second. This is a small, inexpensive card scraper, cabinet scraper, whichever one you want to call it. And I firmly believe that everybody from the start of their woodworking journey could do with one of these. And they're not that expensive. I don't think you should buy just one. For the money, I think you should buy a set of 3. Because you get the regular one, you get one with a concave and a convex end, and you get the gooseneck scraper. In a second, I'm going to also show you the new one that I've bought to add to my collection, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. But before we get to the extra card scraper that I'm recommending, I mentioned before there are 2 reasons that people don't get these early in their journey. Number 1 is quite easy. I didn't feel I was good enough to get use out of this early on. Here's the thing. I also didn't feel like this was beyond me at the start. which is weird because at the start of my woodworking journey, I couldn't tune this up properly to get a perfect job out of it. I was getting quite a lot of tear out. Now, I don't mind admitting that that broke my confidence. I figured the only solution would be to try and learn how to make this better, which is true. However, if I'd have had one of these at the same time, I could have tidied up the tear out that was left by this. I could have worked around the odd bits of grain direction that caused the tear out, and I could have got a much better job, all for the inexpensive price that these come at. What I'm saying is get a combination of the two, but the second reason that a lot of people don't get these is actually a similar reason why some people struggle with the hand plane, and it comes down to sharpening. I'm not proud of this, but as there's so much in this video and I can't spare the time, I'm gonna have to do a TikTok style sharpening tutorial. Let's start with what you need. Card scraper, burnisher, file, and oil. First up, we need to reset it. You can make a jig for this if you want, but I'm gonna do it freehand. All we're doing is flattening the top, then flattening the sides. Both of those moves can be done on a diamond stone. I'm just doing this quick and easy. Next, run your burnisher flat on the top. Then place your card scraper on the edge of the table, a couple of drops of oil. Take the burnisher at a very slight angle, flip and do the other side. With your burnisher very slightly tipped, roll the burr over, increase the angle slightly for the finishing part, and do the same for that side. In a nutshell, what we've done there is we've fed the metal upwards and then curled it round into a burr on both sides. So that burr now will carve the wood. Now, not every burr is going to come out absolutely perfectly with that method, but with practice, it will. Let me show you the difference. A good burr will get you beautiful shavings. I purposefully left one side of this not done. The difference of not having a good burr there is that you get dust. Don't throw it away if you haven't managed to get it to do shavings yet. Just keep practicing making burrs on it and eventually they'll come. I also want to let you into a little secret there. That was done with the grain, but look what happens when you do it against the grain. That's right, it still does a pretty good job. And that's why I say get one of these, because it's more forgiving than a hand plane. It's easier to practice on, but more than that, it gets you out of a lot of tight spots with grain direction. But this is my latest purchase, and I think this is phenomenal. Because not only do you get the card scraper flat edges on the side, but you also get these curved corners, which, well, are aimed at doing things like juice grooves on a cutting board. Now, big caveat with this, I've shown you the quick way, the quick and easy way that will get the job done. The longer you spend flattening initially and resetting this card, the better the burr will be, because there'll be less little breaks in it that you wouldn't see unless you used a microscope. So if you have the time, take the time. Use the diamond stones to completely square off that top, and then you'll get a much better burr and it'll do a better job for longer. Fact of the matter is, if you're a woodworker, there's a very good chance that you're going to have to carry sheet goods at some stage. Plywood, MDF, chipboard. This is a panel carrier. This one's made by Craig. There are other brands out there. Let's say this is the panel you're going to carry. You pop it over the top, and when you lift up on the handle, the weight of the board locks the grip onto it. This is better. All this is, as you can see, is piece of 3/4 inch ply, handle cut in it, some padding taped onto it, and a couple of pieces of wood screwed through the back with a slightly larger piece screwed from the front. You sit your plywood in like that and then carry it with a nice straight arm wherever you want to take it. When you carry wood with the Craig panel carrier, you hold it like this, with the panel of wood going down your side. And it is relying on a straight wrist. So you're using all of these tensed up. This relies on a straight arm with the panel up here, supported into place with an arm across your body. So all of your strength is coming from a straight arm in a natural position and your shoulder muscle. Now, I'm no expert in anatomy, but that feels like it's using less muscles and relying more on a body in a more natural position of strength. Throw a few bits of scrap wood together, make sure you put enough screws in it that it is strong enough to carry up to a 3/4 inch thick plywood sheet, and, well, in every situation where possible, get someone to help you, because 2 people will make light work of it. But if you have to go with 1, I'd say make your own jig. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember, all of the tools are down in the links below. If you did like this video, like and subscribe, and this one is very similar, and it's how it started. If you've already seen that, or if you're new to the channel, YouTube's picked this one for you. I'll see you over there.